Before we get started, we want to let you know that there is a pretty liberal use of the F word in this episode. It's in the title of our guest book, and we thought it would be more authentic to use the word than dance around it. If this is uncomfortable, maybe skip to the next episode. If not, we hope you enjoy our conversation today. It's very informative, and thanks for listening. Welcome to Behavioral Grooves, the podcast that explores human behavior through a behavioral science lens. I'm Kurt.
And I'm Tim. We like to explore why we do what we do with some of the smartest and brightest people in the world so we can learn from them and share some of their knowledge with you, our listeners.
One of the great things about this work is that we talk to a wide range of experts, from social psychologists to primatologists to economists to business experts.
And to parenting specialists.
Oh, which is one area I know I could really use some help with, Mr. Houlihan. I definitely know that.
Get in line. Our guest today is one of those parenting specialists, Sue Donnellan. And she's a mom of 4, a business owner, an award-winning author, and an expert in helping parents improve their child-raising skills and mindsets. We were able to talk to her about her new book, Secrets to Parenting Without Giving a Fuck.
If you are like me and want to be a better parent, then this episode is just what the doctor ordered. Sue provides some great insight into why the command and control approach that many of us were raised with and might be what we're using with our own children may not be the most beneficial way to parent.
Yeah, she talks about how she came to the realization that she couldn't continue with the way she was parenting before and just needed to find a new way, one that was better for her and her children, and takes us on that journey of discovery, talking about how we need to give up our ideas of control, stop micromanaging, work with them on setting up mutual expectations.
And Tim, she gives us the secret mantra.
You're not going to tell us? Yeah, I'm waiting. You're not going to tell us what the secret mantra is?
Nope. Because if I did that, then why would you listen to the episode? So we're going to make you listen to this episode to find out.
All right. I guess, Groovers, you're just going to have to listen. And note that it's somewhere around the 26-minute point, by the way.
Hey, that's cheating. That's cheating, Tim.
Just trying to be the host with the most here.
Pretty sure that's already the case, Mr. Houlihan. Pretty sure that's already the case.
Okay, and just to note, for anyone who isn't a parent, or if your kids are out of the house, like mine, this is an episode that still holds some really fundamental truths that can help be applied to non-parenting situations. So go ahead and listen. We urge you to look for the larger insights into how we behave as humans and how the tips for parents are really just tips for everyday life.
Oh, so true. So true. Okay, with that, sit back with a big pour of parental get through the day liquid and try to relax with a little time that you have between packing lunches, taking kids to ballet and soccer and piano, and setting up camps and play dates and everything else of our busy parenting days, and enjoy our conversation with Sue Donnellan.
Sue Donnellan, welcome to Behavioral Grooves.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
We are as well. We're happy that you are here. And we start every episode with a speed round. So no surprise here. We will ask you 4 questions. Pretty simple, but let's see how this goes. So the first question is, do you prefer coffee or tea?
Coffee. But I drink both, but coffee.
Oh, okay. So now, is there a time we've talked to other people who it's like coffee first thing in the morning, and then at about noon, I switch over to tea? Is there any kind of routine that you have with that?
Coffee in the morning. I do have herbal tea with my meals, but more than anything, I drink 3 of these a day of water.
3 big things of water. There you go. Very, very good. Okay.
If I had to pick coffee or tea, coffee.
So how do you get life done not being in the bathroom all day?
I have a liver of steel. I had triplets.
Oh, okay. We can't go any further down that hole. Second question. Dinner. Would you prefer to have dinner with your favorite athlete or your favorite musician?
Musician.
That was pretty quick.
I have a favorite musician.
And can you share? Is that a secret, or can you share with
Not a
us?
secret. It's not somebody that anyone would ever expect. In fact, she is on my ringtone for probably 25 plus years. I haven't changed it. And she's like a soul sister, even though I've never met her. But I really identify with her. And her name is Sade. You know Sade?
Yes.
Ever since the 80s, I mean, grew up in the 80s, you know, I just love her music is timeless and classy. And I can hear it over and over and over again, 20 plus years, and I hear something new. I just can't say enough about how much I love Sade.
Oh my gosh.
Smooth operator. My
Yes.
gosh. Oh man. Fantastic.
Yeah. Cherish the Day is my ringtone. So
And 20 plus years with the same ringtone on that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, my kids make fun of me because when we first had phones, they couldn't transfer the ringtones over every time, and they didn't really perfect the downloading way back in the day. And I was like, I had a little flip phone, and I'd bring my kids in with me, and you're keeping my Sade. I don't care what you have to do. If I lose all my stuff, you're keeping my Sade ringtone. So yeah. Yeah, I love
I'm sure Tim might have some more questions about that as we get into the musical portion of the episode. But we are still in the speed round, which of course is never speedy, as our listeners know. So third question: when you are having a hard time deciding between two things, should we make a long list of pros and cons, or should we sometimes just flip a coin? What do you think?
Typically, what I do when I have usually I'm very opinionated and make decisions in a snap. I'm pretty good with that. However, when I do have a conundrum, what I do is I wallow in the full ramifications of, 180, 360 degrees of it. And then I let it go. Within about a week, the answer comes to me.
Okay. Interesting.
I wallow. I think, if I go this way, left, right, up, down, what are all the ramifications of every part of that decision? And then I just put it out of my head, and then a lot of times I'm in the shower putting on makeup or waking up in the morning, when my brain is relaxed driving.
Yep. Yeah.
And the feeling will overcome me, or I'll get a message, or I'll get a feeling as to what the right answer is for me with that situation.
That's interesting. So there's a psychological principle called the Zeigarnik principle, which basically says, look, if you're thinking about something, you end something halfway through, our subconscious mind still process that, even though we're not necessarily consciously thinking about it, and oftentimes helps in some of that brainstorming, decision making, various different aspects of it. So it sounds like, and it's not apples to what you're talking about, but there is an element of there that it sounds like the Zeigarnik effect is taking place back in your subconscious as you're moving through that. So cool.
Well, I try to be in touch with my instincts and my intuitiveness, and that really helps me. That just, I do have a little thing that I put in the book about flipping a coin. If you have a hard time with a quick decision, flip the coin, and when the coin is landing, you're going to immediately have a feeling of what you hope.
That will be, yeah. My heads or my tails. There you go. Good.
It is a valid choice. But if it's a really important decision, I usually sit on it and let the answer kind of come through me. And that has always worked.
Good.
That's fantastic. Okay, last speed round question. Do parents really have control over their kids, or is it just an illusion?
Oh, God, it's an illusion, and you shouldn't have control. You shouldn't want to have control. And yeah, we'll get into all of that. But no, we don't have control over anyone.
Yeah. So we are talking with Sue Donnellan about secrets to parenting without giving a fuck. And we need to just let's just start at the top of it here. Give us first of all, why the title? I love, you got a great story as to, it's really not about the kids. Maybe you could just start with sort of what's the overall thesis and why you named the book this.
Well, first of all, the word fuck is in my authentic vernacular. Okay. So I swear like a sailor. I love raunchy comedy. I'm not shy about any of that. Right. And so I didn't use it to be cute and attention getting. It is. And actually one of the dads that I've mentored for years is the one that came up with the title. And once I heard it, I could never unhear it. I thought,
wow.
I mean, I really did try to come up with an option that didn't have the word fuck in it, because it does complicate my selling of the book.
Yeah.
I can't advertise on Amazon and so forth. I can't spend ad dollars. They won't take ad dollars for the word, if you've got the word fuck in there. But but it really captures the counterintuitive message of what my mentoring is about and what my parenting message is about. So the title, like I said, came from somebody who's been mentored by me and has changed his life through some of the things that I've taught him with his relationship with his daughter. And he's the one that came up with it. And I just thought, wow, yes, that's it. So I love the title. And as I worked in the process of, editors and so forth, all the different people that touched the parts of the book, no one told me to change it.
That's great.
So
I love that.
Yeah. So I feel passionate about the title. I think it's as descriptive as I want it to be for the content that's inside of the book.
Yeah.
So help us understand what that content is. What is the main thesis of the book? If you had to boil it down to the quick 30-second elevator pitch, which I'm sure you can't, but if you had to, how would you describe what the book is about in your point of view here?
Yeah, it's about that we think that we have to change the child with any behavior. And ultimately, what we really need to do is change ourselves and the way we view and the way we perceive, and just that understanding of the fact that we are only in control of ourselves. We're not in control of anyone else, nor should we be. And that the counterintuitive message that I like to pass is that, we do the opposite of what our instincts tell us and we become better parents. Generations, we've been parenting a certain way of like restriction and punishment and all of these things, and they don't work. And yet generation after generation is like, I don't know, my kids are talking back to me. I can't get my kids to listen. So that in parenting without giving a fuck, really learn how to let go of what you shouldn't be managing and controlling, release the child to discover and learn on their own. And respect is at the foundation of that, where I respect you to make decisions. I respect you to make mistakes. And I respect you to learn from them.
I think it is really great. And I love that the title actually sort of tees up the idea, at least in my mind at first, is, well, it's about parenting, meaning controlling or managing the kids. When there's this really lovely juxtaposition about really it's about changing yourself, about changing the parents' behavior. How did you come to this idea of turning the tables on the conventional wisdom about parenting is really about managing yourself first?
Well, so the quick background is that I never really liked kids and never really wanted kids. So that's the fun.
And you have 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am the one that would be surprised with triplets when I was not really wanting. I mean, this is hilarious. I mean, anyone that knows me finds the humor in the story. That's known me for years. I was never really a fan. I was never really coochie cooing with babies and wanting to hold anyone's baby. And I just wasn't drawn to the motherhood thing. But my husband is an amazing man, comes from a bigger family, loves kids, is truly perfection. We met in college. We're together 30 years, loves.
And his name is?
Tim.
Yes. Sorry, I just couldn't.
You had to.
I had to.
We marry this guy and, he wants a family. And I'm like, how bad could it be? Right. So
that is like the best kind of, how bad could it be? Let's just, whatever. All right.
Well, I'm a businesswoman. I run my own business. And I always tell him this was a business decision. Like, I'm happily married. You want a kid? I have a kid. I mean, how bad could it be? It was a business decision. So
okay.
we got the one. And then it was really just tripping over ourselves with this kid. He drops his muffin and we're picking, we were just consumed with this one child. And I thought, okay, if I had one, I should have 2. This kid, needs a buddy, get pregnant my second time and find out that 2 eggs dropped in one split, end up with, going from 1 to 4 kids immediately. So here's a person who never really thought she'd be in the family way, now very much in the family way. And I had a lot to learn, right? So those with the most to learn sort of become some of the best teachers, right? Because our journey, I like to say my learning curve was like a vertical line. I went from, my arrogance and my ego and just, I tell the kid to do it. He's so happy I asked, right? I didn't know. Who knows what? I had no idea what it took, the nuanced layers that it takes to parent a child. So, you ask how I came to this way of thinking that parenting is about the parent. And that was just from hard knocks real life, being thrown into the deep end from 1 to 4 kids and a full-time business and a husband who deployed, overwhelmed, drowning in stress, kids not listening, and me screaming my head off. So I had to really shore myself up and say, what am I, I've got to figure this out. And I notice my kids' eyes are glazing over when I'm yelling, and I know that it's not working. So I had to they were in a Montessori preschool at that time. My oldest was, I think, in kindergarten, and I was just yelling all the time. I mean, I'm Italian, I'm like screaming, do it because I said and be happy I asked, and so I took a parenting class at the school, and that sort of opened my eyes to what children are capable of.
Even like in preschool.
Yeah.
Blown away that I am chasing my tail, doing laundry, packing lunches, doing all this work for 4 kids when they are going to this Montessori where their foundation is about independence and can do, right? What the kids can do. And that just opened my eyes to, whoa, how, if I structured my home this way, and if I asked questions this way, and if I, allowed the kids their journey, and I stopped controlling and yelling, what would happen? And I just, I learned quickly. And, the triplets were 3, and Matt, my oldest, was probably 5. And, I really just had to do an about face. I had to pivot quickly because I was really, really drowning with stress. And like I said, the yelling. Yeah. And of course, we all find out that doesn't work, right? So I was very aggressive hunt to find out what did.
Well, it's interesting that you talked about you being a business person and kind of even the business decision to have kids and different things. We talk a lot on the show about relationships in the workplace and dynamics between colleagues. And there's seems to be a big overlap in parenting and in the relationships that you, again, as a boss, you don't want to be the boss that is always yelling and do it because I told you to. And similar, it seems like in this. So why do parents struggle to let go of that thinking of having control over who their children will become, all of that kind of stuff?
Well, it's about ego. And in the book that I wrote, I did it very deliberately. The first half of the book is your relationship with yourself, because life is about relationships. So the first half is about your relationship with yourself. And then once we get that sort of under scrutiny, then the second half of the book, we take what we've learned in the first half and we take that into the second half is about your relationship with your kids. And interesting, Kurt, you bring up such a great point, because after going through all of these methods and trials and tribulations with what's going to work with kids and the psychology behind it all, and really kind of hammering that down and finding out what worked and experimenting. Wow. I end the first half of the book with the magic mantra, and that is going to help everybody's relationships with everybody. That was a phenomenal awakening for me as to learning this magic mantra and sharing that, because it helps every relationship, not just your children, but with your marriage. So my husband, who's in the military, flew fighter jets, and now he's a general, has said that, the foundation of raising children and what you're learning is applicable to leadership, and it's applicable across the board. And if you can learn these methods of letting go of control and getting your ego out of the way and understanding when it's your ego talking, then when that moves out of the way, you're less apt to control. You're less apt to need to have other people do it your way. It just opens your mind to all sorts of possibilities, and it really frees the kids up to experiment and learn on their own what's going to work for them, because what works for me doesn't necessarily have to work for them. And who am I to say that my way is the best way? Because then in the second half, we talk about partnership parenting, and that's a whole mindset right there. But anyway.
Okay. So you teed up the magic mantra. All right. Now, are we gonna make people have to go out and buy the book, or are you going to?
Well, so the magic mantra, it came to me out of sheer frustration of having 4 teenagers. And so early on, when you're a parent, your kids need you so much. You are so needed, and you're so, your opinion is solicited, and it's also cuddly and warm and wonderful. And then, preteen hits, 12, 13 starts to hit, and their friends start to become way more important to them and their social life. And you're just chump change at that point. And I found myself really having to figure out how to let go and when to let go. And the magic mantra is that I'm only in charge of me. I'm not in charge of you. And that sounds so deceptively simple. But when you embrace the idea that, well, I'm tapping out, I'm only in charge of me, I'm not in charge of you. When you really roll around in what that statement means and how it manifests in your life day to day, and you force yourself to really let go of where you think you need to be involved. Wow. As I said earlier, I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm very type A, do it because I said, right? If I can't do it, if it's going to get done right, I'm going to, that type of thing. And I really, really had a lot to learn to let that go and let life spontaneously evolve the way it's meant to. And whoa, did my relationships change for the better across.
Well, and this is central to this whole idea of parenting without giving a fuck, right?
Yes.
Like this is, I can only control me. I can't control you. Was there like an aha moment that you like, oh, that's it? Were you in the midst of the teenage years when all of a sudden, wait a minute?
It was definitely the teenagers, because like our oldest is 2.5, 3 years older. So he's probably 16. The triplets are 13, around this age. I'm knee deep in it. Of rejection and, questioning and fighting and stepping the toe over the line. I'm just, and this is when, if I can get parents with younger kids and they get this foundation, they get this philosophy, by the time that your kids reach that 13, 14 age, you know that you've got confidence in all that you've taught, all that you've trained, all that your kids have been able to discover. That where you are able to let that go, you're able to understand that restriction creates rebellion, and you're able to understand what's going on and how they need to go learn lessons on their own and through other people like teachers, coaches, bosses. It's time now that you've done your work, you've laid your foundation, and they are now ready to be learning from other people. And that's when you really let that go. They know your answer to everything because you've been talking, you've been training. So I'm only in charge of me, let me know how that works out for you. Right?
Yeah, right. Because that's really how we are. And kind of getting back to that speed round question, it really is an illusion, right? That we really think that we are somehow in control of other people. One of the things I recognized in the way that you're writing the book, in behavioral science, we talk about choice architecture, framing questions. Like we would never ask a child, well, would you rather have this really healthy piece of celery, or would you rather have a donut? Like, we would never frame that, because we know what the answer is. But you would frame things like, would you rather clean your room now or in an hour? And then you would set a timer. How difficult was it to enforce those? Because there is, we call that good choice architecture, where you're allowing them to choose, but to some degree, they know that they're going to have to choose, cleaning their room. How do you go about enforcing things like that as a parent who doesn't give a fuck?
Well, you give very much of a fuck on certain things. If you're giving the child respect and you're not micromanaging, I like to talk about how I really had very few rules, but the rules that I had, I did not deviate from. So, those rules change. It's an ever-changing landscape, right? So when they're teenagers and they have a curfew, I have a chapter in the first half about not being for sale. So I'm not for sale. If I'm going to set the tone, or we're going to come up and we're going to partner on a curfew, we're going to decide that, and I'm not deviating. But there's a lot of other open-ended. Here's the boundary. The boundary is drawn in a wide, big circle. But you have so much choice within that circle to make choices and to fall on your face and to make mistakes and to learn and grow. So when it comes to setting the timer and asking them to clean their room, understand that going into that decision, I haven't already micromanaged them. I already haven't browbeat them with a variety of things they need to do and how they need to do it. It's very, very open-ended. So you have to kind of decide up front what you're going to stand on and what's important to you. And then you talk to the kids up front. Here are my expectations. And you lay it up front. And I have a whole process that I talk about, parenting in advance and looking for patterns. But anyway, you sit with the child, and this is one of the things that parents don't think to do, but we think that we have to be up here, making all the decisions and executing all of that. Whereas what you really want to do is you want to sit down and talk to your kids, and at any age, 5, 6, 3, 4, my expectation is this. Tell them in advance, give them the timeline that you want it done, and then you have to follow up. Yes, I make it sound like it's easy. Are there going to be times where you have to take them by the hand? We discuss this. You get this buy-in up front when you deal with them in advance. Here are my expectations. We're doing a lot of this advanced thinking, which I help parents do. What's important to you? And like any boss would do, what's important to you? Here are my expectations. And here's your timeline. And it can happen. That mentality can happen through all the ages, through all the phases. And that's kind of how we structure it in the home, very much like the real world. I try to structure and mirror society in my home so that when they get out there, they know that if they don't show up for work, they get fired.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of parenting in advance. And that's kind of my methodology for getting that to work with your example of getting the room cleaned.
So our research associate, Mary, that had a big input on some of these questions that we had. And one that she found really interesting, a quote from you is, guilt is like having a third boob. It serves no other purpose than to make you feel weird and wrong, which I would have to say I double down on that. And that's a great question.
That would be wrong.
Just weird and wrong. Right. And so, but this idea, you bring up this point though, that we get swallowed as parents by this guilt. Like oh my gosh, my kids aren't doing what, I thought they would be doing, or I did something and I'm, have done this horrible thing. And now my kids are going to be paying for it long term, when in fact it's probably not the case. But how do we overcome, or why do we get swallowed up in that guilt? And then what do we need to be doing about that?
Well, again, getting back to the structure of the book, that's why I did ego and letting go of control prior to guilt. Okay. Because we do have to understand when our ego is making decisions and when our ego is involved in anything that we do, you need to really put a mirror on yourself and deep dive. And I have questions at the end of the chapter that help expose all of those things. And I give some examples too about how I had to put the mirror on myself. And basically the whole book is me pimping myself for the reader to learn the lesson, because I made all of these mistakes and I had to learn. So, but when it comes to guilt, I happen to be pretty lucky. I just don't do guilt. I'm not an emotionally based person. I'm not emotionally run. I'm very, very big picture. And that's kind of whenever I found myself sort of in the minutia, finding myself maybe a little bit more emotional than normal, I always went up to the big picture and thought, okay, how is this going to matter in a week, in 2 months, in 3 years? Just very broad stroke thinking. And it's a fishbowl. Parenting is every single day you are discovering something new, learning something new that you've never seen before. We have to be easy on ourselves. We don't have to know these answers. And when parents are going through parenting with their firstborn, we don't know what's in store. So we make a big deal about things we don't need to make a big deal about, which is why people write books and why people mentor, because we want to help other parents avoid all that drama and stress if we can. So for guilt, I happen to be wired differently, that I just don't do guilt, but I felt it was important to put in the chapter and really break out the parts of guilt, right? The society that we, the guilt that we put on our kids, and all the 4 different types of guilt that are out there, and to make parents aware of that and maybe recognize those emotions when they're going on, so that you can sort of step back and go, do I own any part of this? If I do, let me clarify my position or apologize if it was a miscommunication. And then I'm letting it go. It takes practice. But if you own your part, you don't need to do anymore, because I'm only in charge of me. I'm not in charge of you. I'm not in charge of how you hear this. I'm not in charge of how you're interpreting it or what your perception is. These are things you have to work out. And I respect you enough to figure that out. So when it comes to guilt, I really try to train parents to understand what's going on, isolate the emotion of what maybe is triggering that feeling for them, and learn how to let it go, because it's all in control of you. So fix it, apologize for it if it's a miscommunication, clarify and move on. You're done.
I'm glad that you brought up the magic mantra again, because what I love throughout the book is that you sort of talk about two sides of the same coin. One side is the magic mantra, but the other side is 360 decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk through this 360 tool that you use to help think through really challenging problems, to help get you to a bigger picture, to actually kind of deliver what you're talking about there?
Yes, I put that information in the second half of the book because I really did work with my kids to help them make more informed decisions. I'm a big fan of wisdom, and I really sort of thought long and hard about how do we inject wisdom into our kids? How do I do this as a parent? It's my responsibility. How do I get my kids to get, like I said, out of that fishbowl and look at all sides of a situation? So we talked about awareness in the book, situational awareness and, your internal awareness, connect with your gut. What information is before you that you can use to help you make a more informed decision? But with the 360-degree thinking, it's really training my kids to, asking if they have a situation, instead of giving them the answer, look at a situation and ask yourself, what happens if this, then that, when that, then this. So as they were teenagers and they were able to understand things a little bit more thoroughly, I just drew a line on the napkin. I was out eating with one of my kids, drew a line, drew a little, here you are, here's the fishbowl of high school. And here's where you're going to be in college. And here's where you're going to be, in your career. Let's get our brain out of this moment. Children really, really, and with the mental health right now, they're so immersed in the minutia. How do we get our kids outside of their brain, outside of themselves? And so the 360 it gives them the opportunity to realize that they have and own control of every decision. So think before, think after, think up, think down, and come up with your best choice, the most informed choice. And here's how to think it through. And as a parent, I would spend time with them deliberating all of those choices. But what it did was it gave the kids more independence. It gave them a chance to feel empowered and trusted. And that's ultimately what I do when I make my decisions. So then you asked me that early in the podcast. That's what I innately do. And then I found that since I innately do that, I taught my kids to do that. So I really wanted to put a decision-making chapter in the book because I think it's important. Not a lot of people talk about that.
Yeah,
it absolutely is. I loved it because it kind of gets out of a lot of the emotional decision making that many people do on a daily basis, and we don't think of it as emotional, decision making. We just think, well, I just made the best decision at the time, but it wasn't necessarily considering what might happen if this goes well or doesn't go well. What would this decision mean if things go, if this particular aspect isn't compliant, or, to actually think through the what ifs, as you say, to sort of red team, blue team, your own decision. I just thought that was a pretty fantastic thing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's important for kids to go through that exercise and to be taught and trained how to think strategically and how to incorporate wisdom into their decision making, and to really hammer down on their ability to be autonomous and make choices and stand by those choices. And if it's a mistake, well, so what? Guess what? I have the choice to make a new choice.
Yeah.
So I think, I think it's important to teach them that.
I also love that you don't have to be 90 years old to have wisdom. that you absolutely buy into the idea that you can teach wisdom to teenagers. They can act wisely.
Well, yeah, they're going to do teenage things for sure. Their brains are not fully developed, and this is where they have to make their mistakes. But again, if you're a parent letting go of control, the earlier the better. I like to say that, you assume that at 18, the kids are out in college or whatever they're doing, you have until 18. The more mistakes, the more I can set the ground for rules for them to make those mistakes at 13 to 18, the better, because now they're still at home with their safety net.
Yeah.
So I'm allowing freedom of choice within my boundaries. Again, I'm deciding up front what my rules are. I was big about curfew, and I always made it 30 minutes before their friends. that was just a little tactic that I used, that just, you wouldn't believe what happened. If your friends had to be home at midnight, mine had to be home at 11:30. You can't believe how many times the kids heard, "You wouldn't believe what happened when you left." So like they kind of, it kept them a little bit sheltered. But so that was something I really was not deviating from. But all the other choices they were able to make without judgment, because they're adults in training. So the more I could get them to experience life, wisdom, mistakes, and decision-making before they left the house, the more wise they became. And that can't happen if I'm clamping down and restricting and punishing. It doesn't teach anything. I grew up grounded and punished. It did nothing but made me a better liar.
Yeah, I mean, you get the backlash from that, right? It's the same thing in most people. We fight against those restrictions that we have because we don't feel that is fair, and even if it is fair, we don't feel that it's fair, and thus we push back and we fight against that. I am just, it was really fascinating, and just kind of again thinking, going back to the whole piece of having this mindset of coming into parenting, of letting things go. And I just wanted to say, you talk about the 4 F's. And I love this kind of, because it's a simple way. Again, you have these things that are really easy to remember. If it's not feeding you, funding you, fixing things for you, or fucking you, then you shouldn't give a damn what they think. I would love for you to just expand on that and help us understand, help us dig into that a little bit deeper. But I love the fact that it's there, and it's like, all right, this makes this pretty, not just the mantra, but now it's like very kind of getting more specific as we're moving forward there.
It's just another way of helping parents adopt that mindset of big picture parenting, of letting go, and learning the not giving a fuck mentality. And again, it's a counterintuitive. Of course, we give very much of a fuck, but it's learning where to discern, what's important, and how to build that foundation of respect and partnership with our kids. That again, we forget that we can ask them.
Yeah.
Get buy-in. You can't believe what happens if you sit down and talk to your child and ask them the question at every age. What do you think of this? What kind of, parents glaze over when you say, well, ask your child what they think is a fair curfew. Well, let me tell you what, if the kid's going to come back and go, well, 1:00, okay, well, I can see why you'd want that, but let's try midnight for now. Let me see what you do with midnight. Do you think that kid's going to come home late if he thinks he can earn a 1:00 curfew by showing up at midnight? I'm getting buy-in. It's respect. It's partnership. When you start asking them the question and you start saying, if getting back to your whole saying about the if it whatever the fuck, if we don't if it's not fucking feeding us, it's just getting back to that mentality and helping frame it in a way that helps a parent understand that there's not really a whole lot we need to be concerning ourselves with. And I do talk in the book about my need to be needed early on. I didn't want to be that needed. So yes, me getting my kids to pack their own lunch and do their own laundry at 5, they were capable of it. They loved doing it. And it was less that I had to do. Win-win. They felt so accomplished. So yeah, that's why I put that saying in there, because I think it was just a fun way of highlighting the mentality that I'm talking about for parenting.
Yeah, it's great.
Thanks.
So since the book has been published, we've had a global pandemic. With what has happened in the last couple of years, would you reflect on anything in the book and process it differently?
Not a thing. No, not a thing. This stands the test of time.
Yeah.
This book was written, it took me about 3 years to write, but it was written from, 2 to 20, really. My oldest was off to college. This book, it transcends all of the phases, all of the different, dynamics that are to come. It's like 2 to 20, the ages. And I look back, and with each passing month, with each passing year, I'm just as proud of the book and the content. I'm very, very proud of the content because it works. It's real world parenting. It's just, from the trenches. This is real world. This is what it took to get 4 kids out the door, independent, making their own choices, all marching to the beat of their own drum. My goal as a parent was to get them to find their purpose. They were sick of me saying, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Find that passion, because it's not my passion. It's your passion. So if I'm not getting involved in control and I'm only in charge of me, you're going to find what gets you out of bed in the morning. And that was my whole goal, is to help them. And now I've got 4 kids all doing 4 different things, all thriving and extremely happy and productive. And nothing could make me happier as a parent.
Oh, I wish our listeners could see your face, because you're just glowing. It's just really, it's a fantastic image just to see a parent happy about life. I don't have an easy segue, but I do need to ask you about what music you would take with you if you happen to be on a desert island for a year. Yeah, of course. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
All day long. Again, it's timeless. It's like listening to her songs feel like new songs every time I hear them. I don't know. She's just great. I really, but I do like all kind of music. I like rap. I like, dance. I like all kind of, the only kind of music I'm not such a fan of is country. My kids aren't happy to hear me say that, but I do like all kind of music. But Sade is just that timeless. She's very meditative. So if I were on a desert island, that's what it would have to be.
If you had a second artist catalog that you could take with you, who would that be? Or does it even matter? I mean, once you've got Sade, it's just... I love
music. I do love music. I have to have music. I love the vibration of it. I'm not wired naturally to be able to write or read or sing. And I find the talent extraordinary from people who have that gift. I find it, I could just be in their company and marvel over them creating music and just creating the sound and the words. I don't know. I love all kind of music. It's, it's just very comforting. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I would have.
We're instant friends. I just want to let you know, just for saying what you just said. You want a place in the Hall of Fame for just being so pro music, because that absolutely affects us. Just out of curiosity, when you were writing the book, did you listen to music while you were working?
I did not. Well, I guess that's not true. I do have music piped in through the house, and so it was in the background. Actually, yes, I did. I didn't have the music on to inspire me. It wasn't like, classical music was inspiring me, that type of thing. But I did have, 60s, 70s, and 80s on. And those songs were memories to me, just growing up with the music that my mom had on in the house. So that did help me connect to memories and just times when I was growing up and sort of deep diving my own childhood, which is something that I did. And I do talk about that in the book of, you have to ask yourself the hard questions. What did I bring into my parenting role, and how was I raised, and what of that did I like and what don't I like? Yeah. And I talk about how I lied to my mom all the time, and why? Because she was controlling my every move. She was micromanaging. And at that time, she thought she was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I think is important for parents to realize. None of us are doing anything wrong. We are doing what we think is best. But when we're not getting results, we have to go, that's when we start going out and looking for help. How do I, get my kids not to talk back to me? How do I get them to help out around the house? That type of thing. So I had to ask myself first, because parenting is about me.
Yeah.
And how I show up for my child. So why did I lie? And then that brings me to the conclusion of, well, control doesn't work. Yeah. Punishment doesn't work. So what does work? And just how do you get your kids to talk to you? That was really one of my favorite chapters, was how to get your kids to tell you everything.
I love the fact that you had the music being piped in 60s, 70s, 80s, and it wasn't necessarily on purpose, but that does kind of trigger some of those memories and brings you back to that time period. And that's one of the things that Tim and I have talked about on the show is music has that ability to transcend time and to take us back into time. And again, there's been research that shows most people tend to listen to the type of music that they really liked in very formative years. And those are the ones that we tend to fall back on when we're in stress and various other aspects of life. And so really kind of fascinating that you had that music going on as you were writing the book and bringing up that piece of, hey, it's a self-reflection on how I was raised and what was working and not working. So fantastic.
And I didn't do that actually until you asked me the question. And then I, because when you asked me if I had music playing, I initially interpreted that to mean, did I have inspiring, did you, some people like classical music, whatever, like, But no, actually, yes, I did have music on the background. It was very subliminal, very subconscious. And yes, those memories were flooding back, and they did help generate the content in my book 100%. Yes.
That is fantastic. Sue Donnellan, thank you so much for being a guest on Behavioral Grooves today.
Thank you for having me. What insightful, fabulous questions. I love, all your questions asking about the book, and it's been very, very fun.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I groove on what we learned from our discussion with Sue, have a free-flowing conversation, and talk about whatever else comes into our so damn tired and worn out brains from being parents and being sick and whatever else is going on. Just everybody, for listeners, our own Mr. Tim Houlihan is overcoming a bout with COVID. So he is trooping
Full
through.
disclosure.
He wins the Trooper Award for the week. And damn, I give you kudos, dude.
Well, you've been through it, so you know what it's like. But here we are, and and getting back to parenting, it can be exhausting. It can be it's the trial of a lifetime, isn't it? To have years of trying to figure out how to be the best parent that you can be, so your kids grow up happy and healthy and safe and all those kinds of things.
Well, and I think that's what every parent wants, right? They want to provide the best opportunity for their children to be successful, to be adults that are good people, have positive interactions, and live a life that's fulfilling and beneficial.
Yeah.
And this idea that the way that we've done it in the past is the way that we need to do it in the future, I think is one of the interesting pieces that Sue brings up. This idea that maybe that's not the case.
It certainly is. It also starts with what you just said is it starts with the parent saying, this is the parent that I want to be.
Mm.
And that's kind of an ego-based statement, right? And I think one of Sue's core tenets to her thesis is you got to let go.
Yeah.
Right. You kind of have to let go of that ego because we it doesn't always help us.
No, it doesn't. And the piece that I find really interesting about this is that concept of letting go of your ego is a much bigger concept than just as it relates to parenting. That
absolutely,
you can use this as a leader. You need to be letting go of your ego as a coworker.
Right.
In podcasting, we need to let go of our ego, Tim,
We did that a long time ago. When we started the podcast, we let go of the ego.
Well, I think I kind of think that got beaten out of us pretty quickly as we realized, oh crap, what are we doing? We don't know shit. So anyway, I think it's in general, right? I mean, this is a concept that can be used that we are a part of something bigger, right? This idea that, it's not about us, it's about something bigger. And in parenting, it's about this idea of bringing up these children to be adults. And that is a much bigger thing than the immediate need of being in control or whatever else it is there. So,
yeah, I like the way you state that, Kurt. And this idea of control, like I get it from the perspective of, you have to keep the kids away from the hot stove.
Yeah.
Right. Don't run with the scissors. I mean, Sue had some non-negotiable things, like the curfew was a big deal for her. But there are so many other things that are just not till death do us part kind of issues, that there are just lots of things that we can let go of our own ego and the I know better story, and yet we do it over generation after generation because that's how we were raised.
Do you have things that when you look back, I mean, your kids are out of the house now, but do you have things that when you look back, you go, God, I fought them on this, and in the big picture, that was something I didn't need to kind of have that on.
How many hours do you have to talk about? I've got lists of things that I mean, there are certainly some regrets. But I also know that at the time I was doing the best that I could. And in some ways, I wish that I would have had Sue's recommendations to kind of help pull me out of that and say, you know what, this whole idea of control is an illusion. So get over yourself.
Well, there are some things. I mean, I know with my kids, and luckily my kids don't listen to the show, or at least they don't get to this far because my daughter uses it to fall asleep, so she's asleep by this time always. But for instance, with my daughter, I just have a visceral response when I walk into a room and it's just a mess. It is literally just, it's like crap is on the floor everywhere. And granted, you know me, Tim, I am not Mr. Neat, clean freak, right? And there's not this like, right. Oh my gosh, everything has a place and it needs to be in there and it needs to be 100% sanitized and everything, no, that's not me.
But you have limits too.
But there are limits where it's like, oh my God, how can you live in this? This is like, rats are going to be, just in your room. The rest of our house, they're not going to be in, but they're going to come and live in your room. And, this is one of those things where I just go, given what Sue has said, I'm like going, I need to probably readjust my thinking on this and think about, all right, so how do we set up a mutually agreed upon a way of approaching this, as opposed to me going in there and going, oh, God damn, and swearing and saying, clean your freaking room up for.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway. But that's the ego, right? That's the ego. It's also this element of saying, all right, obviously it's not working because it still does, this has been years and the behavior hasn't changed. As a behavioral scientist, I should understand, well, I need to try something new. That obviously, I'm not very good at learning.
Well, we're trying, right? We need messages multiple times, and that's okay. I just wish I would have heard them earlier. What did you think about the magic mantra?
I'm only in charge of me. I'm not in charge of you. I'm only in charge of me. I'm not in charge of you. There's an aspect of that I think is really good, right? This idea that it goes back to Stoic kind of thinking, right? It's like, I can only control the controllables, and everything else is the stuff that we tend to worry about and get all worked up over. And if you can't control it, don't do that, right? Don't get worked up over it. So I think there's some really good stuff there. Yeah.
As leaders in the corporation, I think it was Cecile that we talked to, who said it's not about managing people, it's about managing tasks. We can work on controlling tasks, but let's not try to control the people. Let's let the people do the tasks, but let's focus. Let's focus on the tasks, and as managers, which is a term that she really rebelled against, let's get the people who are responsible for getting other people to do things focus on tasks and objectives. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's something that I've used in my own career when, as the teams that I was responsible for, it was always about getting stuff done.
Yeah.
It wasn't about an individual who was a slacker or, and when that was the case, it was like, what's the issue?
Yeah. This is exactly what, Sue was talking about from a parenting perspective. Set up expectations in advance. Yeah. Here are the non-negotiables about what needs to happen, from this perspective.
Right.
But within there, how you get something done, what motivates you to do it, what are different pieces. Let's work on that together. Let's figure this out. This is a mutually beneficial way of approaching this, because it makes it easier for you and easier for me. And wow, that's good.
Right. You could actually take a little bigger view of the whole thing, of everything. Zoom out a little bit, right? As they say, let's not focus too much on just these micro things, because once we have a little broader view, it's like, oh, well, in the big picture, maybe this one little thing isn't quite as important.
I loved it. I loved it. And I can't remember, when this was, but Sue talked about this idea. Will it be important in a week, in a month, in a year, in 10 years? Again, go back to, Elisa's room. Am I going to be important in a week, a month, a year, 10 years? Those are important. But then again, I think there's pieces of this that go broader, and this goes for leadership, it goes for everything as well, is sometimes that, part of the role as a parent is to teach and to instill values that you think are going to be beneficial for somebody long term. Right. And so the task itself is not necessarily the important thing, but it's the element that is driving that task that creates that value for the person, that teaches them a lesson about what they're needing to do. Again, as we think about business, as we think about our other world, sometimes it's less about the task than it is about the learning that comes out of doing that task. So
there's absolutely that. Yeah. Anything else?
The only there's two things. So one, and I thought this was really interesting, this idea of 360-degree parenting, this idea of getting your kids to think like that in order to, because we tend to focus in on the very narrow kind of scope of that task that's in front of us and what I want today as a child, right? We know their brain development isn't where it fully is. And so as much as you can to get them to step out of that immediate gratification, temporal discounting, world that we tend to live in, and take a larger 360-degree perspective, that red team, blue team thinking, this idea of gaining wisdom, right? I think that's important. And then the other piece, and this is the piece that I'm taking out of this, is that I love this quote. Sue said, "Look, they're adults in training. This is what this is. This is your children are adults in training." Now, granted, probably not maybe when they're babies and those young, but I mean at 12 and 16, where my kids are, they're adults in training, and I need to be giving them the opportunities to learn and to become the adults that we want them to be. Yeah.
Right. And learning takes place in a lot of different ways, right? Sometimes it's giving them the agency to act on their own, and sometimes it's not, sometimes it's more collaborative. I think that's a great point. And maybe that's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So we hope that you've learned something from this episode, even if you don't have kids, or maybe they're already grown up and flown the coop like mine. But the ideas that Sue presents are really just good, common sense ideas that we can all learn to live by.
And as the magic mantra says, I'm only in charge of me. Focusing on ourselves and our reactions is key to being a better parent and a better person.
Agreed. If you found this episode useful in any way, think about who else might benefit from it. We always are grateful, and we encourage you to share it with other people, especially people who you think could benefit. So send them a note, highlight them, and highlight, whatever episodes in a social media post. We really appreciate it.
And if you could leave a positive review on Apple or whatever pod services you use, hey, if for no other reason than to make Tim and my day, and Tim is sick. So, think it's like giving him soup is to write a review. Yes. It would be it would warm his soul and make him feel better if he saw a great review. Think of, he's pushing through for you, our listeners. He's pushing through to give you this episode in a timely manner, even though he's feeling sick. So, the least you could do,
get over your own ego. and help my ego. All right. Well, with that, folks, we hope that you were able to pick up something today that will allow you this week to go out and find your groove.